Take them down.
By including that we have now upgraded to video recording of this MPO policy board.
Okay.
So, so just so you're
Which
aware,
camera, so I can hide behind Matt?
all of them.
Okay.
There's no hiding.
Ah!
So I just preface that before we begin today.
Like at the county where I have to be right on top of it. Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. We'll call this meeting to order. Our MPO Policy Board meeting, Thursday, November 21st. Do we have any public comment? Is here to observe?
No.
Okay. Next item, approved minutes. Approve the October 17, 2019 minutes.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say same. Regular agenda items, 2020 Unified Planning Work Program.
So we have before you today our 2020 Planning Work Program. We've been working on this in coordination with the Technical Advisory Committee to develop a work program for next year. I'll review a few of the highlights of that program and not the entire 20-ish page document. Our major work is planned for next year is completing our Safe Routes to School planning in Lawrence, Eudora, and Baldwin cities. So we'll bring back plans of all of those. We will also plan to bring back and finalize and complete the county-wide portion of the bikeway plan that we began earlier this year. We plan to integrate and begin a process of coordinating to update the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan with our Regional Transit Advisory Committee. So that's all of our paratransit and human service providers. And there's some interest from participation from county and human service providers, non-human service providers that are not just transportation. And so we expect a more robust process to update that plan. We anticipate, and we pushed off previously, that our participation in some of the City of Lawrence ADA transition planning work. And we anticipate to participate with staff time in the 23rd Street corridor land use study that we anticipate to happen probably from the part of the 23rd Street corridor between Iowa and the Haskell Bridge that our East 23rd Street study did not entail. And then we have all of the rest of our typical core MPO planning work, like our T2040 performance reporting, all of our transportation improvement program amendments, our bicycle and pedestrian counting, and all of the work we do to implement all of the existing multimodal plans. So that's what's in our work program for 2020. I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have about that. We had this out for a 30-day public comment period and received no public comments. And TAC recommended approval at their November 12th meeting.
Okay. Are there any questions for Jessica? We have a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say same. Okay. Next agenda item, 2020 safety targets.
So we have before you again, for many of you, this is multiple times now, the process of adopting our annual targets, safety targets. We'll walk through them all in a second. We are expected to adopt annual targets based on federal requirements for what we expect under 5 safety categories. And Cece, if you want to stop at the first one, okay, for a second. These targets are a reflection of what we project historically to happen in 2019. So the 2019 number in our trend line that we have to use to make a 2020 projection is based on trend information because we don't have 2019 data. Obviously, the year is not complete. And so we project first what that will be and then make a projection about what we believe the 5-year rolling average is all for all of these targets. TAC wanted me to reflect to the MPO Policy Board the very challenging conversation they had around setting targets. The real challenge they had to come to terms with is, in many cases, we're setting targets to say that we expect fatalities and injuries on our roadways. And while that's not in anybody's goal for the region, it is the reality of all of the variety of conditions that lead us to many of the accidents that occur on our roadways. So while many roadway projects do geometric improvements or make other safety improvements, there is still the human condition of distracted driving and texting while driving. There's also the changes in VMT and cost of fuel prices that impact and have historically impacted these numbers over time. And so we added a note, and I want to point that out to all of these, that basically details that the MPO desires improve safety beyond the target. However, the target reflects the rolling averages with the projection based on a historical trend. Because we can't change the name target, we can't change the process for which that we are expected to do this because it's dictated by federal regulation. We could, of course, set a different target, but we don't feel in the conversation that that's realistic based on what projects are in the resource allocation that's currently being made to roadway improvements and expectations about what we've done culturally to make those shifts. So I will just preface this conversation with that discussion. We have that discussion every time we talk about setting targets that are not zero, because I think it's challenging to grasp for somebody that would see this politically, that we basically are setting that expectation, and part of that is through a required process. So for number of fatalities on all public roadways, you can see kind of a flatlining of some of the 5-year average, rolling average, even though there have, that trend could go down. It's gone up, it's gone down, it could go down, and we could see a little bit lower in the end based on our historical average for 19. We project our 2020 at 7.1. For performance measure 10, the next one, rate of fatalities per 100 million VMT on all public roads. We see here a rolling average that's kind of over time bounced between 7/10 and 8/10. Point. So that goes in 2017 with a projected 7/10. It goes to 8/10, and that's our projected target. For performance number 12, number of serious injuries on public roadways, on all public roadways, here we've seen a continual kind of rolling average that's in decline, and so we project that movement still with a rolling average that gets us down to a 5-year average of 15, based on that trend information. For performance number 12, the rate of serious injuries per 100 million VMT on all public roads, we also see a similar decline. That gets us down to a target of 1.1. And then for the final factor, the number of non-motorized fatalities and injuries on all public roadways, we are also seeing a declining historical trend. This one is always a variable where we have a challenge in making this projection because we realize the more people that are walking and biking, the increased instance and risk for those conflicting movements and interactions. So we are projecting a reduction in these injuries and fatalities, but realizing that there could be changes that impact this, that change us and allow and provide us not to meet our target. Those are the 5 targets that we proposed setting for 2020. We had a 15-day public comment period, which is not required by federal law, but in the interest of transparency, our MPO has chosen to do that per our public participation plan as a way, because these are automatically integrated into the performance report of Transportation 2040. We wanted to provide that they have an opportunity for public comment. I'd be happy to entertain any conversation as you entertain to adopt these targets for 2020 so we can submit them to KDOT and our federal partners.
Any comments or questions?
So the fatalities or serious accidents, that's all modes of transport? So that includes the motorcycles, the scooters, anything on the public roadway?
It is, as long as it included a motor vehicle in the crash. So for example, if a motorcycle would count as that,
Right.
but if 2 bicyclists collided and there was something that happened, that doesn't meet the qualification to go on no, it doesn't
Okay.
get on this list at all.
Okay.
Because a motor vehicle has to be involved for this report to be filed. So there is concern possibly that there could be some underreporting. For example, there was a known fatality in the city of Lawrence that involved a single cyclist, and that did not show up, even though it was ended up as a fatality, it did not show up in this data because this relies solely on Kansas motor vehicle accident report forms.
And it's on public roadway?
Even though it was on the public,
It was on the public roadway.
that was on the public roadway,
Okay.
but because of the stipulation of how the state requires data collection, it must involve a motor vehicle. That's literally what the form is called. And so we understand when we're talking about non-motorized users that there could be an underreporting of crashes and serious injuries because of the nature of where the source of this data is. And that's a national conversation because that is the case in many places. When we start to talk about all of the expectations about why the feds have set these targets in their performance reporting process, is to really standardize how they collect data across MPO regions nationally. And that has led us to challenge some of the notions behind that because for many places, that's probably the case, that it's underreported.
Any other questions or comments? Jennifer, you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the 2020 safety targets.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, say same. Okay. Quick updates. Safe routes to school.
Yeah, so we have been continuing our Safe Routes to School process. We had an open house in Lawrence, and we're going to be planning visits to site council/PTOs for all of the elementary and middle schools in Lawrence. We did it a little bit differently in Eudora and Baldwin City and attended parent-teacher conferences at all of the schools. That was a little bit easier since there aren't as many schools, and staffed those and got survey response and engagement back from parents at those events. So we will be in the process of following up to draft all of those documents as we finish collecting engagement from Lawrence through site councils and PTOs. Also included in the quick updates is the recent TAC minutes that were approved for your consideration.
Any questions or comments on the quick updates? Okay. Other business. I would like to say, I don't know who all was aware of it, but MPO, I mean, to me, it's Jessica and Ashley because they do all the hard work, but MPO was, policy board received what I want to say, recognition from the Live Well Douglas County last Friday morning at their breakfast for basically all the hard work that you guys do for everything. So thanks for making us look good. But I did drag Ashley and Jessica and Jennifer up there with me because I wasn't going to take credit for that.
It's hard for us from our perspective. We're doing our
Well-
work, which is reflecting the community's voice about the call for active transportation. And of course, that plays into the health of our community. So we were honored to accept that recognition as a health champion. But really, it's the voice of our community we reflect in our plans and programs, so.
Any other business?
I just add, my term on the city commission expires in about 14 seconds, and so this will be my last MPO meeting, and thank you for helping me through it all and all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise, thank you for your service
Oh, boy.
on our board.
Glad to give it.
Anything else? All right, next meeting,
We anticipate not needing a December meeting, and so we have canceled that, as you've probably seen. So we will be scheduling and corresponding to discuss January. At this point, I'm not sure what our workload's going to look like enough to what we'll have to bring back. We may or may not meet then, so we'll be in touch.
So real quick, one thing that just occurred to me about the safety plan, the change in definition of serious injury, was that factored into any of the discussion of how those numbers might drastically change?
We did have very, very little discussion about that because
Okay.
we're kind of going to wait to see what happens in terms of what we get back.
Okay.
In terms of our numbers and the result of that. But yes, there has been a lowering of what the threshold is for serious injury.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
yeah, we kind of decided to wait until we get to that.
Good idea.
I mean, we're going to set it based on what we think because we really have no clue.
Right,
And so we're going to set it based on what we think and then,
but you're required to use 5-year rolling average
Yes.
that has 4 years history of a different definition.
Yes,
Apples to
correct.
oranges, let's play.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is it going to be a more stringent definition or less stringent?
More
There will be more
stringent, I think.
injuries.
And it'll be,
We anticipate there will be more.
and it'll be universal for the US. Every state will have the same one,
Okay.
instead of every state having slightly different ones.
I see. That's good to know.
anything else? All right, move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jennifer.